Hey, mop guy, you come prove something. The laugh that followed didn't sound like humor. It cracked through the midnight air of the Mitchell MMA gym, bounced off the trophy case, and landed at James Washington's feet like a dare. He didn't look up. He tightened the wringer on the old yellow bucket, pressed the mop's head into gray water, and drew one last clean line across the edge of the mat. Smooth, steady, methodical, like he'd been drawing lines his whole life. Dividing what belonged to him from what didn't. The fluorescent lights hummed above a restless halo over a room that was supposed to be about discipline and respect. Tonight it sounded like a stage. "Derek, it's almost closing," a woman's voice said. "Cool, professional. Let your students stretch and go home." James knew the voice by now. Dr. Sarah Chun, sports psychology consultant. Kind eyes behind. Librarian frames a purple belt, knotted neatly at her hip. She was always the last to leave, scribbling notes beside the heavy bag, asking gentle questions. None of the fighters had time to answer until the noise of the day drained away. Home. Derek Mitchell barked, spreading his arms to his late-night class like a ringmaster. "You hear that Dr. Feelings wants you to go home, but I think you're about to learn more in 5 minutes than in 5 months. Nervous laughter rippled through the 8 students scattered along the wall. A tall kid in a brand-new rash guard tried to smirk and couldn't, a short woman tying back her hair. Asian mid-20s kept her gaze on the floor. Derek's black belt gleamed under the lights. He was the kind of handsome people mistake for honorable. High cheekbones, a smile built to sell memberships. He stepped off the mat and into the strip of wet floor James had just cleaned, leaving comet tails of footprints. "Come on, man," Derek said voice, dropping to something performative. "No one's asking you to fight. Everybody relax. We call this an educational moment." He pointed the way a coach points at a heavy bag. "You clean the floor we sweat on. Tonight, we'll show you what sweat buys." James wrung out the mop one last time. The handle creaked. He set it in the bucket and leaned it against the wall. His work gloves were cracked at the knuckles from bleach. He slid them off slowly, one finger at a time, and tucked them in his back pocket. "I'm almost done, sir," he said. "Sir," the word he used for every stranger who raised his voice. "I don't want to interrupt your class." "Not interrupting," Derek said, elevating. He grinned at the room. "Everybody gather in. You'll never forget what you're about to see." Sarah stepped forward to shoulders square. "Derek, leave him alone. Your students don't need this." "Respectfully, Doc, they do," Derek said. "They need to understand where skill ends and wishful thinking begins." James took hold of the bucket's metal handle. It was heavier than it looked. He'd learned to lift heavy things like they were fragile and fragile things like they were heavy. He tilted it toward the maintenance closet. "Hey," Derek's voice sharpened. "You mop guy? I'm talking to you." James paused. He turned his head just enough to be polite. "James," he said. "Name's James." "Great," Derek said. "James, show my students a basic guard, half speed. I'll narrate it so you don't get lost." A thin boy, with a mouth guard still in whispered coach. The word died on his lips when Derek raised a finger. Sarah's tone softened. "James, you don't have to do this." "I know," James said quietly. He didn't move. The gym exhaled. Far across the room, the wall clock ticked to 11:58, 2 minutes from official closing, an hour past decency. Outside, a late train rumbled the earth as if the city itself wanted to pass this place by. Derek moved closer, making sure the students had a good angle. "Look at him," he said, smiling to the class, feet flat, shoulders hunched. "This is what happens when your relationship to the mat is a mop and not a mindset." The tall kid let out a beautiful laugh. No one joined him. "Maybe we call it Sarah," said the edges of her patience folding. "We're done for the night." Derek's smile thinned. "We are Doc." Right after the demonstration, he took one last step. The distance between him and James disappeared like a lie when you look at it too hard. "You ever step on a mat?" James Derrick asked the name, turning into a tool. Ever. Feel what it's like to have someone across from you who knows what they're doing? James set the bucket down. The metal handle clicked against plastic, a small sound that felt loud. His hands were calm. He had the kind of hands that had learned every job: pour concrete, fix a hinge, tape a cardboard box, hold a fevered forehead until the fever broke. The calluses along his palms told long stories to anyone who knew how to read. "Plenty of people know what they're doing," he said. "Most of them don't need an audience." "Is that a no?" Derrick said, "because around here, we respect courage. We respect stepping up. We respect respect. Sarah cut in starts with not humiliating people." The students shifted. A few looked at Sarah with gratitude. They didn't know how to voice. The young woman with the ponytail finally raised her eyes just a fraction. Hope, small but real. Derrick chuckled as if he were being gracious. 5 minutes. He told James, "You'll be fine. I'll even let you start in closed guard so you feel safe." James didn't look at the students. He didn't look at Sarah. He turned and walked the bucket to the wall, each step slow, deliberate. He slid it into the narrow space between the industrial fan and the stack of folded towels. Then he reached for the bar on the edge of the mat. There's a way most people step onto a mat the first time too fast, too eager, the nerves making their ankles stiff. James stepped like the floor had already told him its secrets, and he was honoring a promise to listen. Derrick clapped his hands, delighted. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "welcome to Fundamentals Reality Check Edition." James stood at the center circle. He didn't square up, he didn't posture. His gaze was steady and impossibly quiet, like a lake before a storm has. "The courage to touch it. Hands up," Derrick instructed, performing for the room. "Protect yourself at all times. Even a beginner can land something dumb." James didn't raise his hands. "Okay," Derrick said, grin returning. "We'll fix that." He reached out and gave James a small, almost friendly push on the shoulder. The kind of push that says, "We both know who owns this moment." Nothing moved. Not James. Not the air around him. The push looked like a magic trick that forgot to be magic. Derrick blinked the first crack in the mirror. "Interesting," James murmured. More observation than opinion. "Beginners are sticky," Derrick said too loudly, covering. "They lock up. That's fine. That's normal. We teach them to unlock." He circled. James did not track him with his head. He didn't pivot on the balls of his feet. He simply allowed Derrick to move until the circle closed itself. Sarah watched with a professional gaze that didn't blink. She'd seen adrenaline in 100 forms, wild eyes, jittery hands, the false bravado of men who feared they were small. Whatever lived behind James's eyes was not adrenaline. It was something else. Something steadier. Something dangerous in its restraint. "Last chance," Derrick announced not to James, but to the room. "We can do this easy or hard." James's voice was almost gentle. "How about we do it right?" The words seemed to touch the walls and come back with company. Derrick's smile broke for a breath, then returned like a reflex. "Right is my specialty." He lifted his hands. The students leaned in. Breath sank to the beat of a drum. No one could hear. "Half speed," Sarah said, stepping closer, authority in her small frame. "If you're calling this a lesson, keep it safe." Derrick shot her a look that said, "You're a guest here," and then adjusted his stance. Half speed. He lied. He feinted a jab. Casual, dismissive. James didn't flinch. The jab never landed. It didn't need to. Derrick wanted the room to see momentum on his side, the narrative unfolding the way he told it. "See?" Derrick narrated. "He doesn't even coach the tall kid," said suddenly, voice thin. "Maybe watch and learn," Derrick snapped. James breathed in. A quiet breath, the kind you take before you say an apology. "You mean?" He looked at Derrick fully for the first time. Whatever smile Derrick was about to put on vanished. In that gaze was no challenge, No anger, no fear, only a patient kind of authority that felt older than this building. Sarah's chest tightened. She didn't know why. "James," she said softly, not sure what she was warning him away from. "I'm not here to embarrass you," James said, and he wasn't performing. He was telling the truth, and it sounded like a verdict. "Teach your students, don't make them props." A beat of silence. You could hear the ductwork groan. Derek's face colored. "Hands up," he barked, starting forward. James didn't move. The tall kid gulped air. The ponytail woman pressed her lips together like a prayer she didn't say. Derek closed the last step and reached just a tap, just enough to place, just enough to claim. Sarah inhaled. James lifted his right hand. Not fast, not slow. He set his palm on Derek's chest like a father stopping a son from stepping into traffic. Everything in the room leaned forward, and James paused. He didn't shove. He didn't strike. He didn't do anything the camera in some nervous student's pocket could. Turn into a clip called "Janitor Destroys Black Belt." He let the moment hang. 5 minutes. Derek whispered as if time owed him something. James lowered his hand. He took one step back and shook his head once, a tiny, "No," that said, "You don't want to go where you think you're going." Derek grinned and made the mistake of taking that as surrender. He stepped in. The room held its breath. James lifted his eyes, and for the first time all night, the noise died completely. No hum, no breath, no clock, like the gym itself had decided to go quiet. He looked at Derek the way a storm looks at a coastline. "Are you sure?" he asked. It wasn't a threat. It was a mirror. Derek stopped laughing. The students froze. Sarah felt something shift, a pressure change before the first drop of rain. James didn't take a stance. He didn't need one. He just stood there, calm as midnight, steady as a held promise. And the whole room understood, without yet knowing why, that the next 5 minutes would be the kind people remember for years. The mop water had stopped rippling. James lifted his chin, a fraction. "All right," he said, voice even. "Let's keep this respectful." Derek swallowed. "Show me," he tried to say, but the words sounded smaller than he meant them to. James's gaze didn't flicker. And then, without fanfare, without flourish, he took that first quiet half-step that changes everything. Derek's sneakers squeaked on. The mat as he shifted his way to Predator, rehearsing his kill in front of an audience. His smile had returned too wide, too deliberate. Half speed, he reminded, like a teacher pretending to care. James gave no answer. He stood with the stillness of a man who'd made peace with silence long ago. The only movement was the slow inhale, the kind you take when you're about to lift something heavy, not with your body, but with your spirit. "All right," Derek said. "You wanted respect. Earn it." He came forward with a textbook jab. Clean form, perfect angle, everything a beginner might be dazzled by. But James wasn't there. Not anymore. His upper body tilted just enough to let the punch slip past his cheek like a whisper. No flinch, no wasted motion. What Derek barely got the word out before his second punch, a cross aimed for James's temple, met the same fate. James shifted, his weight backward, the punch cutting through air. "Nice speed," James murmured, his tone more like a coach than a challenger. "But your shoulders give you away before your hands do." The students exchanged looks. Some grinned nervously. Others leaned forward as if trying to catch the secret in slow motion. Derek's eyes narrowed. "You think you can read me?" "I'm not reading you," James said. "You're speaking loud enough for the whole room." It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them. Not mocking, not smug, just true. Derek attacked again, faster this time, a jab-hook combination designed to test reactions. James didn't counter. He let Derek's hook miss by inches, leaning with An impossible control that made the move look rehearsed by nature itself. Then, with no more force than a guiding hand, James placed his palm against Derek's shoulder and turned him, not thrown, not shoved, just redirected until the black belt was facing away from the class. Laughter bubbled from somewhere in the back. Derek's neck flushed red. "You think that's funny?" Derek snapped. "No," James said quietly. "But maybe your students will." Sarah caught herself holding her breath. There was something almost poetic about the way James moved, like he was erasing violence instead of writing it. Every shift, every step was deliberate restraint. Derek spun back, jaw tight. "You're just lucky I'm not what James's voice cut. Through the space low and steady, not going full speed, not taking me seriously." The room went still. Derek's pride wouldn't let him step back. He lunged in with a body shot meant to break through. James lowered his elbow, met the force, and let Derek's momentum die in his own arms. Before anyone could process it, James's hand rested on Derek's chest again. And that was when it happened. It wasn't a push, it wasn't even a strike. It was a shift, weight, balance, timing, all aligning in a single fluid motion. Derek's heels left the mat for the briefest second before he stumbled back 3 paces, landing on one knee. The sound in the room changed. Not gasps, not cheers, just the kind of hush that follows something your mind can't quite file away. Derek looked up, his breath uneven. What the hell was that? James offered a hand to help him up. Control. That's the part most people skip. Derek ignored the hand and got to his feet on his own. The black belt around his waist suddenly felt heavier. From the side, the young woman with the ponytail whispered to the tall student next to her. "Did he even hit him?" "No," the kid whispered back. "That's the scary part." Derek forced a smirk, dusting himself off. "All right, enough. Lesson over." "You got your no," Sarah said, stepping forward. "The lesson's not over until we talk about what just happened." All eyes shifted to her. She looked at Derek first. "You wanted to prove a point. He just did without hurting you. Without humiliating you, that's skill and character." Then she turned to James. "And you? Why do I get the feeling this isn't the first time you've done something like that?" James's eyes flickered for the first time, a shadow crossing his calm. Because it's not. It hung there, an answer that invited 100 questions, none of which he seemed willing to answer. Derek broke the silence with a scoff. "Whatever. Show's over. Let's clean up." But no one moved. Not the students, not Sarah, not even James. James finally stepped off the mat, heading for his mop and bucket without another word. "Hey!" Sarah called after him. He paused, glanced back. "You just took the air out of a room full of fighters without throwing a punch," she said. "That's not nothing." James gave a faint smile, the kind you give when you don't want to be seen smiling. Sometimes the best punch is the one you don't throw. He disappeared into the maintenance closet, the door closing with a quiet finality that felt more like a pause than an ending. And for the first time in his own gym, Derek Mitchell had nothing to say. The video hit the gym's private group chat before midnight. No titles, no captions, just 30 silent seconds of a black belt being turned sideways with one hand and sent to a knee. By the next afternoon, everyone had seen it. From the office above the front desk, Mr. Lopez watched the replay on his phone, with the expression of a man calculating exactly how much trouble he was in. 60 years old, barrel-chested with a silver mustache that curled when he was amused, which he wasn't now. He looked up as Sarah knocked on the doorframe. "Close the door," he said. "She did," Sarah Lopez began. "You were in the room last night. Tell me what I'm looking at here, 'cause half the comments think this is some kind of staged stunt, and the other half think I'm running a circus where my head coach gets tossed around by the janitor." Sarah didn't blink. It wasn't a stunt. Lopez exhaled through his nose. "That's what I was afraid of. Afraid she asked." I've got a reputation to protect. Parents pay good money to send their kids here. Professionals pay more to train here. And Derek? He stopped himself, clearly reconsidering the next words. Let's just say last night wasn't a good look. Sarah folded her arms. Then maybe we change the look. Lopez arched an eyebrow. Meaning, she said. You've got someone on staff who can demonstrate control skill and respect better than anyone I've seen in years, and right now the only thing he's cleaning his sweat off the mats. Sarah, hear me out. She leaned forward. Let him run a small self-defense class. Early mornings, no promotion, no posters, no ego, just a handful of students who want to learn how to stay safe without hurting anyone. I'll co-e. Lopez gave her a look, somewhere between skepticism and intrigue. You're talking about the janitor. I'm talking about James, she said firmly. Lopez leaned back. Why early mornings? Because it keeps it quiet. No interference with Derek's classes. No drama. And because people willing to show up at 5 a.m. are the ones who really want to be there. He tapped his fingers on the desk. You think this will make the video go away? I think she said it'll give people something better to talk about. The maintenance closet smelled faintly of disinfectant and cedar polish. James was coiling an extension cord when Sarah stepped inside. You busy? She asked. He gave her a half smile. Depends. If you're here to ask me about the video, I'm busy. I'm here to offer you a job, she said. That made him pause. A job? I already have one. This one comes with no mop. He looked at her for a beat, then went back to the cord. Not interested. You didn't hear the terms yet. Doesn't matter. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Early mornings, small group. You teach self-defense, the way you showed it last night. Control, awareness, respect. I'll be there every session. James chuckled under his breath. And why would I do that? Because she said there's a difference between hiding from your past and using it to help someone else. His hands still illed on the cord. That's a nice line, he said softly. It's not a line, she replied. It's the truth. And I think you care more about teaching than you want anyone to know. He turned, leaning against the workbench. What makes you think I care about teaching? Because last night you could have made Derek a headline. Instead, you made him a lesson. That day landed. The next morning, before sunrise, the gym was a different world. No music, no chatter, just the low hum of the heater and the smell of fresh, cleaned mats. 5 people showed up. 2 women in their 40s, a wiry teenage boy, a security guard from a nearby hospital, and a retired mail carrier who looked like he could still carry 3 bags at once. Sarah handled introductions. Welcome to Defense First. Respect always. This isn't a fight club. This is about staying safe, keeping calm, and making sure everyone walks away. James stood at the edge of the mat, hands in his pockets. We're not here to teach you how to win fights, he added. We're here to teach you how to end them before they start. They began with simple drills, maintaining distance, controlling breathing, breaking free from a wrist grab. James's instructions were quiet, but precise. Don't match force with force, he told the security guard. Move around it. Let it go where it wants, then guide it somewhere safe. When one of the women hesitated, James stepped beside her. You're not trying to hurt anyone. You're trying to give yourself room to leave. Picture the door you're walking toward. Sarah watched him, realizing he wasn't just teaching technique. He was teaching perspective. Every example came back to choice, to the idea that real strength was knowing you didn't have to prove it. After class, as the first rays of sunlight cut through the front windows, Sarah found him by the water cooler. They liked you, she said. They liked learning something they could use, he replied. That's part of liking you, she countered. He gave her a look, part wary, part amused. Don't get used to it. I think I will, she said. And for the first time since she'd met him, James didn't try to argue. Outside, the city was waking up. Inside, for the first time in a long while, so was James. The second morning class started the way the first had ended, quietly. No pounding, music, no barked orders, just the soft squeak of bare feet on the mat and the rhythmic sound of breathing drills. The windows were still dark, but the glow from the street lamps outside streamed brush strokes. James was on one side of the mat, showing the retired mail carrier how to use her hip to redirect a shove. Sarah was on the other, helping the teenage boy loosen the tension in his shoulders. "Don't fight your own body," she told him. "Let it work. For you, not against you," he smiled faintly. "That's harder than it sounds." "Most good things are," she replied. From across the mat, James glanced over not at the boy, but at Sarah. She had that way of speaking like she was teaching two lessons at once. By the third session, they had a rhythm. James demonstrated, Sarah broke it down. Then they switched, roles without saying a word. Between drills, there were small moments. A shared look when a student finally nailed a technique. A smirk when the security guard cracked a joke about using pineapple as his safe word in the hospital parking lot. It wasn't flirtation, not exactly. It was something quieter, slower. Two people recognizing in each other a kind of patience that only came from living with pain you didn't advertise. After class one morning, Sarah stayed behind to help stack the pads. "You know," she said, sliding a focus mitt into place, "you have a very particular way of correcting people. Particular how James asked carrying a stack of shields to the wall. You don't tell them what they did wrong. You tell them what they can do right." He shrugged. People remember what they're told they can do. The rest just clutters the mind. "Not a bad philosophy," she said. "It's survival," he replied. "On the mat and off." Sarah leaned against the wall. "So where'd you learn that trial and error?" James paused, looking at her just long enough for her to notice the flicker in his eyes. "Mostly error," he said. It was the kind of answer that invited more questions, but she didn't press. Not yet. 2 weeks in the class doubled in size. Word had spread quietly, just as they intended. People weren't coming for a fight. They were coming for the way they felt when they left calm, capable, a little taller. That morning, Maya appeared. James didn't see her right away. He was showing the group how to keep their balance when someone grabbed their arm. But when he looked, up mid-demonstration there, she was in the doorway. Hoodie, half-zipped backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes scanning the room. He froze for a fraction of a second before finishing the move. Sarah noticed. "You okay?" she whispered as she passed him a pad. "Fine," he said. But his voice wasn't convincing. During the water break, Maya wandered in, hands in her pockets. "Didn't know you were running a class," she said. "It's new," James replied carefully. "Looks good," she said, though her tone was more curious than complimentary. "You want to join?" Sarah asked, stepping in. "We've got an extra mat." Maya hesitated, glancing at her father. "Not today." Then she added, "Just wanted to see what you're doing." James gave her a nod that was more formal than warm. "You saw it." Her eyes searched his for something else. An explanation, maybe. When it didn't come, she muttered, "All right," and left. Sarah watched her go, then turned to James. "That's your daughter?" "Yeah." She didn't look like she just stumbled in by accident. "She didn't," he said, and left it there. After everyone left, Sarah found him in the corner, wiping down the mats. "You know," she began, "there's a difference between protecting someone from the truth and just shutting them out." James didn't look up. Not when the truth can do more. "Damage or more healing," she countered. He stopped mop mid-stroke and finally looked at her. "Some wounds close better if you don't rip them open again." Sarah stepped closer, "And some stay infected if you don't." The silence between them was heavy, but it wasn't hostile. It was the kind of silence where both people know they're right, and that's the problem. The following class, the mood shifted. James was more deliberate, almost gentler. He took extra time with each student, making sure they not only understood the mechanics, but also felt the why behind it. When the teenage boy managed a perfect escape from a wrist grab, James gave him a small nod. That's it. You didn't fight. His grip. You fought for your space. Sarah caught the boy's grin and the way his posture lifted. It was the same look she'd seen in new patients who finally believed they weren't broken. After class, she walked with James toward the door. Whatever you think you're avoiding, she said this. She gestured to the mats. This is proof you're still in it, whether you admit it or not. He didn't answer, but there was the faintest curve at the corner of his mouth. Outside, dawn was breaking. The light spilled through the windows in long, warm stripes, painting both of them in gold. For a moment, they just stood there in the quiet glow, neither rushing to leave. You're not bad at this, Sarah said. Teaching. Letting people in, she said. You just do it sideways. He chuckled. Guess it's better than not at all. And as they locked up the gym, the thought neither of them said out loud was the same. The class wasn't just for the students anymore, it was for both of them. The apartment was still warm from the oven when James carried the takeout to the counter, 2 paper-wrapped burgers, a box of fries, and a slice of apple pie he hadn't earned, but bought anyway. He set the food down like a peace offering and listened. The old radiator clicked. Outside, a bus sighed. In the back bedroom, Maya's cello case thumped shut. She emerged in an oversized hoodie and socks, hair pulled into a loose bun. 16 going on steel. She stopped when she saw the food. You don't cook on Tuesdays, she said. I do when I owe you time, he answered. She didn't smile. You owe me more than a burger. Then we'll start with 2, he said gently. Hungry. Maya sat, peeled the paper back, and took the smallest bite a human being could call a bite. So she said, eyes on the burger. Not on him. You're teaching classes now. The words weren't a question. They were a blunt instrument. James pulled out a chair across from her and sat. Early mornings. It's small like a secret, she said. He looked at the steam rising off the fries and wished he could step into it, disappear as vapor. It's not meant to be a secret. Then why did I find out from a video? She reached into her hoodie pocket, slid her phone across the table. The paused frame showed him on the mat, hand on a man's chest, the whole room holding its breath. Maya tapped the screen. The video moved 30 seconds, silent. No context, no captions, just her father doing something she'd never seen him do. When it ended, she looked up. Who are you, Dad? A dozen answers jostled inside his mouth. None of them left. She waited. I asked 2 things of you, she said quietly. Tell me if you're in trouble and tell me the truth before the internet does. I'm not in trouble. Then why didn't you tell me? He exhaled. Because I didn't know what it was yet. It looks like teaching, she said. It looks like the part of you pretend you don't have. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. You've got school, recital, a life that doesn't need to be interrupted by my old one. Interrupted, she repeated, tasting the word like something too sour. My life has already been interrupted. First by a dad who won't talk, then by a video of him being someone else. Maya, he said softly, I'm the same person. People don't hold men in midair by being the same person, she shot back. The radiator clicked again. In the silence that followed, he remembered how small her hands had been the day she held his finger like a dock line, like he could tie her to something stable. He'd promised himself he would be the shore. Okay, he said, and forced steady into his voice. Here's what I can say tonight. I'm teaching people how not to get hurt. I'm doing it with someone who understands why that matters, Dr. Chun Maya said, not quite hiding the curiosity. Sarah, he corrected and then realized what his mouth had done. Maya arched a brow. First name basis noted, Donnie said, but it came out lighter than he meant. She leaned back, folded her arms. I'm not mad that you teach. I'm mad that you're a ghost in your own house. He nodded slowly. It's hard. What is picking a door? He said. She frowned. What does that mean? In class, we tell them to picture the door they're walking toward. Not the person in front of them, not the fear, not the noise, the door. It helps them move. I've been staring at too many doors at once. Then pick one, she said. Pick the one that opens toward me. The line landed like a compass needle, finally finding north. He managed to smile. You're getting good at this. I listen when you think I don't, she said. They ate in the soft clatter of forks and cartons. After a minute, Maya said, What happened to the man in the video? He stood up, James said. I offered him a hand. He didn't take it. And you didn't humiliate him. That's not a win, James said. That's a stain. She made a face at the pun, but her eyes warmed. So, the class is really about not fighting. It's about keeping people whole, he said, including yourself. Maya picked up a fry, snapped it in half. I'd like to learn that, she said. The keeping whole part. You already are, he said, and meant it. Dad. She waited until his eyes were on hers. If there's more, say it before it says itself. There it was, the door she had opened for him. He could feel the old keys in his pocket, thin, jagged, memorized. He put his palms on the table. There is more, he said. It's not today. Maya studied him. Is it dangerous? It was, he said, long time ago. Is it about why you don't like loud crowds? He smiled without humor. You're getting too good at this, she softened. Then tell me when you can, not when it breaks. He reached for her hand and she let him take it. I will, she squeezed. You promise a lot, she said, but there was no edge, only truth. I'm trying to keep the right ones, he said. They finished the pie. The room exhaled with them. On her way to her room, Maya stopped at the hallway closet. Hey, she called, holding up a small brown bag. Why is this under the towels? The bag's canvas looked too familiar, stitched initials hardly visible. J.W. He took it from her gently. Old gear, he said, doesn't fit the life I want. Her eyes lingered. Then why keep it where you can touch it? He thought about lies. He chose a smaller truth, because some things you carry to remember how not to carry them. She nodded as if that made sense and didn't at the same time. Good night, Dad. Good night, kiddo. Her door closed with its soft click-click protest. He stood with the bag in his hands and the old weight settling into his bones like a familiar winter. The apartment went quiet enough for him to hear himself think, and that was the part he feared most. He walked to the bedroom he used as a catch-all spare chair. Sewing. Kit. A shelf of tools lined up like good soldiers waiting for orders. He set the bag on the dresser and opened it. The smell reached him first. Not sweat time. Leather that had held every kind of breath. Nervous, triumphant, hollow. He ran his thumb along a seam that he had stitched himself years ago in a motel. Room with bad art and better light. A pair of gloves came out scarred and softened. Tape, an old mouthguard case with a cracked hinge. Beneath it, folded careful as a flag, a towel with a faded logo, National Gym Las Vegas. He sat on the edge of the bed. The room lifted and settled the way it does when a train goes by or a memory puts its hand on your shoulder. He told himself. He was only looking. He told himself he wasn't going back anywhere but forward. At the bottom of the bag, his fingers found a square of Polaroid tucked in a side pocket. The photo had bent corners and a sun-bleached edge, two men grinning with their arms hooked around each other's necks, one of them younger by a lifetime, the other with a smile that could light a hallway after the power went out. Tony, the name, arrived without permission. James closed his eyes. In the living room, the radiator hissed, then fell silent like it too was listening. He held the photograph in both hands. The way you hold a fragile thing you're afraid will break if you try to save it. The room thinned. The years obeyed. A knock at the door made him flinch. 3 soft taps. He slipped the photo back into the pocket, shut the bag, and walked out. Sarah stood in the hallway, hair damp from the drizzle outside a paper folder in her hand. "I shouldn't be here this late," she said already, apologizing with her eyes. "You're fine," he said, stepping aside. She came in and held out the folder. "I brought the updated waiver for the morning class," and she hesitated. "I saw Maya earlier." He nodded. She saw me. I could tell Sarah said, "James, you don't have to do it alone." He looked at the closed bedroom door down the hall, then at the folder, then at her. "That's the hardest part," he said. "Remembering alone isn't the same as strong." She set the folder on the counter. "I don't think strength and silence are synonyms." He almost smiled. "You have a quote for every room?" "I have rooms that need them," she said. They stood in a quiet that wasn't awkward. Then Sarah's gaze drifted past him to the brown bag on the dresser. She didn't ask. She didn't need to. "Tomorrow," he said, answering the question she didn't voice. "Tomorrow," she echoed. "Tell her the part you can carry together." He walked her to the door. She touched his forearm, small, steady. "Good night, James." "Good night, Sarah." When the door clicked shut, the apartment felt different, lighter in the places where Heavy had lived. He returned to the bag, slid the zipper an inch. The leather seemed to breathe. He lifted the towel with the Vegas logo, and beneath it found the thing he hadn't meant to keep. White hand wrap stained the color of old pennies. His breath snagged. The wall clock ticked once. He sat again. The photograph's edges pressed against his palm from inside the pocket like a heartbeat. Tomorrow he sat into the empty room, and the words sounded both like a promise and a warning. He set the gloves on his knees and let the past rise, not to drown him, but to teach him how to swim. On the dresser, the lamp flickered. Or maybe it was just the memory of the flashes that had gone off that night, hot and unkind. A train murmured somewhere under the city. James closed his eyes, and the door he'd been avoiding for years began at last to open. The gym was empty, except for the soft thud of James's footfalls as he crossed the mat, rolling up the last section before closing. He'd stayed after the evening classes ended habit, or maybe reluctance, to go home to the quiet. Sarah was at the far end, seated on a bench, jotting notes in a spiral-bound pad. She looked up when she heard the roll of tape. "You always clean, like you're erasing something," she said. James straightened the roll of athletic tape loose in his hand. "And you write like you're trying to trap it." She tilted her head. "Maybe we're both doing the same thing, different tools." There was an unspoken moment between them before she gestured toward the storage room. "You've been here late all week. Want to tell me why he set the tape on the bench?" "Not really." "That's not the same as," Can't she said. He sighed, eyes fixed on the empty mat. "You ever carry something for so long you forget what it's like not to feel its weight all the time?" she answered. "But I've learned weight feels lighter when someone else is holding part of it." He let that sit. Then, without looking at her, his name was Tony. Tony Rodriguez. Sarah didn't move, didn't speak. She just set her notebook aside. "We met at the National Gym in Vegas. He was the first one to talk to me like I belonged there. We trained together, fought in the same circuit, shared gear when one of us was broke. He was more than a friend. He was my corner in and out of the ring." James paced a slow line across the mat, his voice lowering. "One night, it wasn't even a real fight, just sparring. We'd been working late, pushing harder than usual. There'd been noise earlier that day, comments from people in the stands during my last bout. Stuff I'd heard before, but that night it got under my skin. Sarah's brow furrowed. Racial. He nodded once. By the time we got on the mat, I had too, much in my head. I threw a combination harder than I should have. He slipped, fell just wrong. I heard the crack before I saw him hit. James stopped pacing. He never woke up. The weight of the words seemed to press the room smaller. They called it an accident. The kind of thing that could happen to anyone. But it wasn't anyone. It was me. And I know the truth. I lost control. I let anger get in the driver's seat. Sarah stood and crossed the mat slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. "James, you've been punishing yourself ever since?" "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe I've just been making sure it never happens again." So I walked away from fights, from teaching, from anything that could put me in that place again. And now she asked. He looked at her. Now I'm standing in a gym again, holding pads for strangers and wondering if I'm about to break my own rule. Sarah's voice softened, but her words were precise. "You didn't just hold back with Derek. You protected him from humiliation. You protected the room from violence. You're not the man you were 20 years ago." His jaw flexed. "Tell that to the picture. I keep in a bag under my bed." She studied him for a beat, then reached into her own gear bag and pulled out a focus mitt. "Hit this." "What?" "Hit it right now. I don't half-speed one shot." Reluctantly, he lifted his hands, turned his shoulder, and tapped the mitt with the measured precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Sarah smiled. "You feel that you're in control. You've built something in the years you've been hiding, something better than power. You've built restraint. And that's exactly what people need to learn from you." He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. From the hallway, footsteps approached. Derek's voice floated in casual, but too deliberate. "Am I interrupting?" James didn't answer. Sarah glanced over her shoulder. Derek stepped into view, hands in his pockets. "Heard a little story tonight about Vegas? About an accident?" James's eyes narrowed just enough to register. Derek shrugged. "Word gets around. I figure your new students might want the whole picture before they buy what you're selling." Sarah's voice was calm steel. "You're not going to use his past to prop up your ego." "Relax, Doc," Derek said, smirking. "I'm just saying truth's a better teacher than anything we do on the mat." James stepped forward, his tone even. "Then teach it right. The truth is, I made a mistake. I've been living with it every day since. But I don't run from it, and I don't let it turn me into something worse." For the first time, Derek's smirk faltered. Sarah took a step closer to James, shoulder to shoulder. "If you think you can scare him with what he's already survived, you don't know him at all." Derek looked between them, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "We'll see," he said finally before turning toward the door. When his footsteps faded, Sarah glanced at James. "You just told him more than you've told most people." "Doesn't matter," James said quietly. "I wasn't talking to him." Her brow lifted. "Then who?" He looked at her, the corner of his mouth almost smiling. "Myself?" She nodded slowly. "That's the first person you have to convince." James picked up the roll of tape again. The mat was still clean, but he started wrapping the edges anyway, more to steady his hands than to secure the floor. Sarah gathered her notebook. "Tomorrow's class, be there early. I want to try something new." "What?" he asked. "Teaching them what you just taught me," she said. "That the strongest thing in the room isn't the person who hits hardest. It's the one who decides not to." He watched her walk out the echo of her words, settling into the space she left behind. For the first time in years, the memory of Tony didn't slam into him like a wave. It just stood there in the distance, waiting, as if it too was ready for the next round. By Thursday night, the gym's energy had shifted. It wasn't the usual hum of mitts smacking leather or the chatter of students waiting for class. It was tighter, a gear. Conversations died when James walked by. Eyes tracked him longer than they should. It didn't take long for him to figure out why. From the front desk, two young fighters hunched over a phone, their faces frozen between disbelief and curiosity. A muffled video played audio turned down, captions flashing across the bottom. James caught 3 words in bold white text before they flicked away. Killer in the ring. He didn't need to see more. In the office upstairs, Derek was leaning back and Mr. Lopez's chair like it was his throne, scrolling through his own phone. He looked up when James stepped in. "Careful, Washington," Derek said, feigning warmth. "People might start thinking you're avoiding me." James closed the door behind him. "You talk to someone." "I talk to a lot of people," Derek replied. "It's part of the job. You know what I mean?" Derek set the phone down, leaning forward. "You think you can waltz in here, play sensei to a handful of nobodies at dawn, and no one's going to ask why a man with your history is hiding behind a mop?" James's jaw tightened. "You think dragging up 20-year-old pain is going to make you look bigger?" Derek smirked. "I think the truth has a way of making itself bigger, and you've been real generous keeping it in the shadows for me to find." From the hallway, Sarah's voice cut in before James could answer. "Find or twist." Both men turned. She stood in the doorway, hair still damp from teaching a late jiu-jitsu session, her expression calm but dangerous. Derek's smirk faltered for just a moment. "It's public record," he said. "I'm not inventing anything." "No," Sarah said evenly. "You're just serving it with poison in the garnish." Derek stood, stepping toward her. "Don't start thinking you run this place, Doc. You're a consultant. You come and go, and you're about to find out that your title doesn't make you untouchable," she replied. James spoke then, low and steady. "If you've got something to say about me, say it to my face, not through a reporter." Derek tilted his head. "Oh, I think the whole city deserves to hear it. I invited someone to tomorrow night's advanced class. Local sports desk loves a redemption story or a fall from grace one. Guess which one you're about to be." The next day felt longer than it should have. Even in the morning self-defense class, James noticed Sarah watching him more closely, as if bracing for impact. After class, as they stacked pads, she asked, "What are you going to do when they come at you with it?" "I'll tell the truth," James said. "And if they only want the headline," he looked at her, the corners of his mouth tightening, "then they'll get one I can live with." She hesitated, then touched his arm. "You don't have to do this alone." That evening, the advanced class gathered. Derek strutted in, wearing his cleanest gi black belt tied with military precision. On the edge of the mat stood a man in jeans with a DSLR camera and a press badge clipped to his collar. Derek clapped his hands. "All right, everyone. We've got a guest tonight, sports writer from the Denver Chronicle. He's here to do a piece on discipline and dedication in martial arts." He let the words hang. And sometimes what happens when those things slip. James stood at the far end of the mat, arms crossed. The students' eyes bounced between them like they were watching a slow fuse burn. The reporter stepped forward. "Mind if I ask you a few questions?" James shrugged. "Depends on the questions." Derek gestured grandly. "Oh, I think you'll find them illuminating." The reporter glanced at his notes. "James Washington, you trained and competed professionally in mixed martial arts, correct?" "Yes." "And you retired abruptly after the death of your sparring partner, Tony Rodriguez." The room tensed. "Yes," James said, his voice steady. "It was an accident, but it happened on my watch." Derek folded his arms, watching the words land. The reporter leaned in. "Do you think you should be teaching, given that history?" Before James could answer, Sarah stepped forward. "Do you think someone who survived the worst day of their life and learned from it isn't the best person to teach how to avoid violence?" The reporter blinked, caught off guard. James's voice cut in calm, but charged. "I live with what happened every day, and every morning I get up and teach people not how to win fights but how to walk away from them. If you want to print something, print that. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the reporter nodded slowly, scribbling. Derek's jaw clenched. "Class dismissed," he said sharply. Later in the empty locker room, Sarah found James sitting on a bench, elbows on his knees. "You handled that perfectly," she said. He shook his head. "Derek's not done. That was round one." She smiled faintly. "Good thing you've always been better, in the later rounds." He looked at her, then really looked. And for a second, the noise of the day fell away. "I'm not worried about me," he said. "I'm worried about the people who believe him before they meet me." "Then keep letting them meet you," she said. "Every morning, every class, that's how you win this." He nodded, but inside he could feel it. The tide was turning, and the storm Derek had started wasn't going to stop at the gym's walls. It was the kind of night that made silence feel heavier than noise. The street outside James's apartment was still, but inside the tension pressed, in like the walls were closing. Maya sat at the kitchen table, her phone face down, a half-eaten bowl of cereal in front of her. She didn't look up when James came in gym bag slung over his shoulder. "You're late," she said. Her voice was flat, but there was something under it, a brittleness that told him this wasn't just about the clock. James glanced at the wall clock. Nearly midnight. Class ran over. I-class. She cut in. Or damage control. The question hit harder than it should have. What's that supposed to mean? She finally looked at him, eyes sharper than he remembered seeing in months. "You think I don't know what's going on? You think I didn't see the posts?" James dropped his bag on the floor. Posts. About you, about Tony, about how you ended his career. The way she quoted it like the words themselves were poison made him feel every ounce of the years between then and now. He ran a hand over his face. "Maya, you can't believe everything you read online. I don't have to believe them," she snapped. "I just have to see how you react every time his name comes up. Like tonight, like you'd rather be anywhere but here." James felt his chest tighten. "I was teaching, helping people. That's why I was late." "You promised," she said quietly. It wasn't loud, but it landed with the weight of a gavel. He knew exactly which promise she meant. The one he'd made after their last big fight. The one where she'd asked him to stop letting the past eat him alive and to start being present. "I'm trying, Maya." She shook her head. Trying isn't the same as showing up. He took a step closer, but she pushed her chair back, creating space. "I get it." "Okay," she said, voice trembling now. "You've got ghosts, and maybe you can live with them. But I'm not going to compete with them for my own dad." For a moment, he didn't know what to say. He'd faced opponents twice his size in the cage, but nothing had ever made him feel smaller than this. "I'm not choosing them over you," he said finally. "Then why does it feel like they always win?" Silence stretched. The next morning, the air between them was still cold. She left for school before he could offer her a ride. At the gym, Sarah noticed it immediately. "You look like someone who didn't get much sleep." "Didn't," James said. "Maya saw the stuff online. She thinks I'm hiding behind the gym." Sarah leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. "Are you?" He shot her a look, but she didn't flinch. "I'm serious," she said. "You've spent years building a wall out of training schedules, early mornings, and everyone else's problems. It's noble until it isn't." He exhaled slowly. "I keep thinking if I can just keep moving, the past won't catch me." Sarah's voice softened. "The past doesn't need to catch you, James. You're carrying it." He stared at her for a long moment. "You sound like my daughter." "Maybe listen to her then," Sarah said before she stopped talking altogether. That evening, James decided to make it right. He cooked real cooking, not takeout, and waited. When Maya walked in, he didn't launch into an apology. Instead, he gestured to the plate he'd set out for her. I was thinking maybe after dinner we could go to the park, just talk. No gym, no phones. She hesitated, then sat down. Okay. They ate mostly in silence, but it was softer this time. At the park, under the glow of street lamps, he finally said it. I should have been there last night. Not just physically. You were right. She looked at him, eyes searching. Why is it so hard for you to let it go? He took a breath. Because if I let it go, I'm afraid it means I'm letting Tony go. And he deserves better than being forgotten. Maya's voice was barely above a whisper. You're not forgetting him, Dad. You're just forgetting me when you focus on him too much. The words cracked something in him. He nodded slowly. Then, I need to change that. Starting now. For the first time in days, she smiled, small but real. Starting now. But as they walked home, James's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Round 2 is coming. Hope you're ready. He didn't show it to her, but the storm wasn't over, and he knew it. The rain had been threatening all afternoon, a low gray ceiling pressing down on Denver. But inside Mitchell MMA, the air felt even heavier. The rhythmic thud of gloves against pads echoed through the cavernous space, but the usual laughter and banter were gone, replaced by a taut undercurrent. James was mopping the far corner when the front door swung open with a force that rattled the glass. Derek walked in, not alone. Behind him trailed a dozen men and women, some with gym bags, some with folded arms, all wearing that half-smirk of people expecting a spectacle. A local cameraman, recognizable from the sports segment on Channel 7, slipped inside rainwater glistening on his jacket. Mr. Lopez froze mid-step near the office door. Derek, what is this? Derek's voice was smooth but edged with steel. An opportunity, Mr. Lopez, for the public to see the truth. He glanced at James, his smile sharpening. Let's see how the janitor does when the lights are on. James straightened slowly, mop in hand, but said nothing. One of the older men with Derek chuckled. Didn't think you'd be the shy type. Sarah stepped forward, planting herself between James and the small crowd. This is a training facility, not a circus. Derek spread his arms, feigning innocence. Then let's call it a community demonstration. Let the people decide if their instructor is who he says he is. The cameraman was already setting up near the mats. Mr. Lopez's face tightened. This isn't sanctioned, Derek. And you know our policy. Our policy doesn't cover frauds teaching self-defense under your roof. Derek cut in. The word fraud hit like a slap. James's jaw flexed, but still he said nothing. His silence made Derek's voice sound even louder, more poisonous. Sarah's eyes darted to James. You don't owe him anything, she murmured just for him. But Lopez's gaze shifted to the camera, then to the restless crowd. James, this could damage the gym's reputation. I have to think about... You're thinking about the wrong thing, Sarah snapped. You should be thinking about the people in this room who came here to learn safety and respect, not blood sport. Lopez exhaled sharply, but his eyes didn't meet hers. If this escalates, I'll have no choice but to reconsider James's employment here. The sentence hung in the air like a death nail. From the hallway, faint footsteps padded closer. Neither Lopez nor Sarah noticed, but James did just in time to see Maya, her hood pulled over her head, stopping near the doorway. She froze as Derek's voice rang out again. Or maybe the truth is he can't face a real fight anymore. A few chuckles from Derek's group filled the silence. Say something. Dad Maya's voice came low but audible. James turned, startled. Maya. Her eyes glistened. Is it true? Did you quit because you couldn't handle it or because of what happened? The room seemed to tilt. Derek was watching with thinly veiled delight, sensing a deeper wound than he'd anticipated. James stepped toward her, but Maya stepped back. Don't not hear, Maya. No. Her voice cracked, then rose. You keep saying you'll tell me everything, but all I get are pieces. I'm tired of guessing who my dad really is. Rain began tapping against the high windows, soft at first, then harder. Sarah moved toward Maya, but the girl turned and bolted. Through the glass front doors, James caught a blur of her hoodie disappearing into the downpour. Maya! He was already moving the mop, clattering to the floor. Behind him, Derek called out, "Better hurry, hero! Wouldn't want to lose another one!" James stopped dead in his tracks. His shoulders rose, and for a moment it looked like he might turn back, but Sarah's voice cut through. "Go," she urged. "She needs her father more than you need this fight." James pushed through the doors, the cold rain slapping against his face. The streetlights bled gold into the puddles, and the storm's wind carried the faint sound of Mia's hurried steps somewhere ahead. Inside, the tension remained. Derek looked around, expecting some kind of victory in James's absence, but Sarah's gaze on him was unflinching. "You think you've won something here?" she said quietly. "All you've done is show everyone the difference between a man who fights for himself and a man who walks away for someone he loves." Her words didn't land on Derek immediately, but the murmurs in the room told him they'd landed on everyone else. Outside, James's figure vanished into the curtain of rain. The storm had arrived not just in the skies over Denver, but in the lives of everyone inside Mitchell MMA. The school's performing arts wing glowed like a lantern in the rain, hallway posters curled at the corners, paper waves and dim light. James followed the sound before he found her the low, aching tremor of a cello that knew what storms felt like. Maya sat on a metal chair in the practice room, hoodie sleeves pushed to her elbows, carving a path that was almost a whisper. The room smelled like rosin and old carpet. Rain stitched the windows with silver thread. He stood in the doorway and didn't speak. The last note hung frayed and beautiful, then fell. "You found me," she said without turning. Her reflection in the glass was a blur of dark hair and stubbornness. "I've been finding you since you were 5, he said gently. "You used to hide under the kitchen table. I was easier to reach then." He stepped inside. The door's soft click felt loud. "I'm sorry about the gym," he started, about letting the noise come between us. "About the way I left you standing there the other night." "Which part?" she asked, B still. "In hand? The part where strangers knew you better than I did, or the part where you decided silence was safer than me?" He took the second chair and sat facing her. "Both." Maya stared at the cello's strings as if the truth might be written there. "I keep practicing the same passage," she said. "It won't hold. Every time I think I've got it, something slips. Some pieces do that," he said. "They break your heart until you learn where to breathe." She finally looked at him. "Then show me where to breathe, Dad." He nodded once. The kind of nod a man gives when he's out of places to hide. "His name was Tony Rodriguez," he said. "He was my training partner, my friend. We met in Vegas in a gym that smelled like bleach and bad decisions. He was loud, where I was quiet, kind, where I was hard, and he believed I was better than I believed I was." He swallowed. The words were rough on the way out. "There was a night, not a fight sparring. I had a good win earlier that week, but the crowd said things I pretended not to hear. I carried them into the next day like bricks. We moved fast, too fast. I threw a combination the way you throw anger when you don't want to own it." He slipped. One step wrong, one landing wrong. The sound was, he stopped. The rain filled the space his voice left. "Dad," she whispered. "They called it an accident," he said. They were right, but it was mine to live with. I walked away from the sport, from teaching, from anything that required people to trust me with their bodies, with their futures. I promised I'd never let my hands hurt someone again. So I put my hands on mops and wrenches and anything that couldn't break. Maya blinked hard. "And you thought telling me would what break me?" I thought telling you would make you look at me and see the worst day of my life instead of your father. I thought if I stayed quiet long enough it would shrink. He exhaled. It didn't. She set the bow across her lap. Do you know what it's like to live with a ghost you can't name? It follows you into school, into music, into dinner. You taught me to be brave, but you wouldn't be brave with me. He flinched. You're right. Her voice softened. Then be brave now. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped like he was holding something fragile. I see Tony every time I close my eyes before sleep. I hear the sound of a glove on air where a head should have been. I smell the tape, the leather of the fear. I walk into gyms and count exits without meaning to. Loud crowds make my heart learn. Sprinting again. He glanced at her, but then I watch you play and something in me slows down. Maya's lip quivered, but her stare didn't. Why did you go back to the gym if it hurts? Because people are getting hurt in rooms where no one is teaching them how to walk away. Because I know how to keep people whole now. And the only way that lesson means anything is if I give it away. And because of her, she asked, not with suspicion, but with the precision of a daughter who sees more than you think. He let a corner of his mouth lift. Sarah reminds me that strength and silence are not the same thing. Maya nodded like she'd already decided she liked that answer. She set the cello upright and rested her chin on the bout. I don't need a perfect Dad, she said, voice steady. I need a true one. The line landed like a key turning. He reached out, not to fix or to hush, but to hold. She leaned into his shoulder, the kind of lean you can only manage when the floor finally feels stable. I'm here, he said. I'm not going anywhere. Her words were muffled against his shirt. Then tell me one more thing. When Derek did what he did when he brought cameras, why didn't you fight? Because he wanted a show, James said. And I'm done being anyone's entertainment. I'll teach a lesson, but I won't feed a fire. She pulled back enough to see his face. So what now? Now, I stopped letting him write the story for us. He stood and moved to the whiteboard on the practice room wall where some band kid had left. A dry erase marker. He wrote 2 words in wide block letters. Open class. Maya frowned. At the gym with him there, with everyone there, James said, we'll turn his challenge into a community lesson. No fights, no belts. Sarah leads the safety. Talk. I'll demonstrate how to end conflict without breaking people. Anyone who shows up will leave with something useful to carry home. That's risky, she said. It's right, he answered. And it's ours. A knock at the doorframe. Sarah stood there, hair damp from the raincoat draped over her arm. Her gaze took in the whiteboard, the cello, and the closeness between father and daughter. I had a feeling I'd find you here, she said softly. Maya straightened a small, guarded smile on her mouth. We're making plans. Sarah glanced at the whiteboard and smiled back. Good plans. James looked at both of them. We make it open to the neighborhood. Invite the hospital staff, the baristas from the corner, the night shift folks who walk to their cars alone. We teach them distance breathing exits the works. No cameras. We don't invite. If media shows, they hear the message or they leave. Sarah nodded, already shifting into logistics. We'll need waivers, extra mats, chairs along the wall. I'll call Lopez and tell him this isn't optional. It's a duty of care, and I'll open with a frame. A safe city starts with safe rooms. Maya tapped the cello end pin on the linoleum. And music, she said. You should have music. James blinked. You mean? She lifted her chin, the hint of a grin. I've been working on something. You called it the other night Quiet Storm. It's not finished. But maybe it doesn't have to be. Sarah's eyes warmed. Sometimes the unfinished is the most honest. The 3 of them stood in the little room with its scuffed floor and humming lights, and for a second the future felt less like a cliff and more like a bridge. Maya shouldered her case. One condition? She said. James raised an eyebrow. Name it. You don't disappear, she said. Not when it's hard, not when it hurts, not when the past knocks. If you need to step outside, you take me with you. He swallowed. Deal. She nodded once satisfied. Then let's go home. They walked out together the hallway, a river of flickering fluorescence. At the exit, Sarah touched James's sleeve. You did the hardest thing tonight, she said. Talking, he asked. Letting her see you, she said. People confused the two. They stepped into the damp night. The rain had eased to a fine mist, like the storm had decided to listen for a while. Across the parking lot, streetlights blurred in puddles, and somewhere a train threaded the city with a low, steady promise. Maya unlocked the car. I'll meet you at home, she said to Sarah, then looked at her dad. Don't forget the marker. You'll need it. He slid the dry erase into his jacket pocket. I won't. As she pulled away, Sarah and James stood under the awning, the soft drum of water above them. She's strong, Sarah said. She's my compass, James answered. They started walking. We'll need to get ahead of Derek, Sarah said. Call it before he does. I'll draft the announcement tonight. I'll call Lopez, James said, and then I'll call a few people who don't get invited to most mats who she asked. People who think gyms aren't for them, he said. Tonight we're changing. The definition. They reached his truck. He opened the door, then paused. Thank you, he said, for pushing me toward the door I should have been opening all along. She smiled, eyes bright. You didn't need me to open it, just to stand there while you turned the handle. He laughed under his breath, the kind of laugh that knows relief and is careful with it. Same difference. Not quite, she said, and then softer. See you in the morning. Coach? He shook his head. Teacher. Better word, she agreed. She walked to her car. He slid into the truck, the marker, a small weight in his pocket, the kind that feels like a promise instead of a burden. As he pulled out, he glimpsed his own reflection in the rear view. Older. Yes. Tired. Yes, but with a steadiness he hadn't seen in years. Tomorrow wouldn't be a fight. It would be a lesson, and this time, he would write it. By 6:00, the gym didn't look like a fight house. It looked like a town hall. Chairs lined the walls. A sign-in table stood near the door with a neat stack of waivers and a Sharpie, the same marker James had carried out of the school. A hand-lettered board read, Open class, defense first, respect always. All are welcome. They came in 2s and 3s. A barista with sleeves rolled to her elbows. A nurse in navy scrubs still creased from the night shift. A delivery driver with tape on his knuckles from boxes, not brawls. An elderly couple holding hands. The security guard from the morning class now off duty and smiling like he knew a secret. Sarah moved through the room with calm authority. Greeting. People by name when she could, by warmth when she couldn't. Thank you for coming. Tonight is about staying safe and leaving whole. She laid out the ground rules with the clarity of a traffic light. No striking, no egos. Consent before contact. If you feel overwhelmed, step off the mat and breathe. Mr. Lopez hovered anxious but present. He'd approved the event after a long call with Sarah, in which she used the phrase duty of care 3 times. And now he watched like a man praying for order. Maya set a small speaker near the sign-in table and tested a soft cello loop she'd recorded, just 2 notes rising and settling like a tide that refused to drown you. When she caught her dad's eye across the room, she lifted her chin. He nodded back. James wore a plain gray shirt and old matte shoes. No belt, no rank. He wasn't there to be more. He was there to be clear. Sarah clapped once. The room stilled. Welcome. We're going to cover distance management, verbal framing, and simple exits. You do not need experience to be here. You only need attention and kindness for yourself and for the person across from you. A few people chuckled softly. The tension leaked out like air from a stubborn tire. She gestured to James. "This is James Washington. He will demonstrate. I will coach the room." He stepped onto the mat, his voice easy but firm. "If someone invades your space, you don't have to match their heat. You can give it somewhere to go." He faced the security guard who played the aggressor. They moved at quarter speed. James showed how to lower his center without shrinking, how to angle hips to create a lane to leave, how to place a palm flat against a chest, not to push, but to signal a boundary the other person had to choose to cross. They practiced in pairs. The nurse laughed in surprise when the delivery driver fell away from a gentle redirect. The barista whispered, "That felt like magic." And James replied, "It's just leverage and timing and the decision not to escalate." Sarah moved like a conductor, adjusting hands, reminding feet, speaking courage into rooms most people carry around their ribs. Find your breath. Doors, not walls. We choose exits. Applause rose after each drill, small, respectful, but it sounded like a people learning how to be on their own side. And then the front door opened. Derek walked in with 6 of his DRs. They didn't take seats, they took space. He scanned the room, faces he recognized, others he didn't, and then focused on the center mat. "I'll take it from here," he said, like a king returning to a room where the crown had been misplaced. Sarah stepped forward, palms open. "You're welcome to observe. This is a community class." "Oh, I'm part of the community," Derek said. He looked at James. "Let's give them the full experience." Maya's shoulders tensed. The cello loop continued a soft, unbothered heartbeat. James didn't move. "This isn't a fight, Derek." "That's right," Derek said too bright. "It's a demonstration." He stepped onto the mat half-speed. "Show them how you did your little balance trick on me. We'll educate the neighborhood." Sarah spoke to the room, voice steady. "We will keep tonight safe. You'll see skilled control, not violence." Derek smiled like a dare. "Don't worry, Doc. I know control." He faced James and raised his hands. "Come on, make your point." James breathed in, then out. He nodded to Sarah, to Maya, to the room. "Remember," he told the crowd, "respect starts with restraint." They squared. Derek took the first step, a test probe, then another. When he reached James, angled off, not fast, just honest, letting the hand slide past the space where his shoulder had been. Murmurs rippled. Derek tried again, sharper. James gave him a target, then moved it a hair, guiding the contact into emptiness. The effect was subtle, but obvious. Derek looked like he was fighting a room that declined to argue back. Someone in the chairs whispered, "He's not even stopping him. He's just not being there." "Exactly," Sarah said, projecting so the back row could hear. "De-escalation isn't a retreat. It's a choice." Frustration tightened Derek's mouth. He feinted high, jab, jab, and lunged for a body lock that would have crushed a less practiced man. James stepped to the outside, hand open, and met Derek's upper arm with a gentle wedge, redirecting the line of force as if he were reshaping water. Momentum took care of the rest. Derek stumbled, caught himself flushed. He came again faster. James didn't. He slid. He let the attack write its own ending and corrected only what would have caused harm. The room could see it, the refusal to humiliate, the refusal to win. "Enough," Derek said, voice spiking. "Stop dancing." He faked left, then drove straight in, shoulder to sternum, going hard in a way that ignored every word they'd said about safety. James changed. He didn't get mean. He got precise. His right foot slid half an inch. His left hand found Derek's triceps. His right palm landed flat on Derek's chest. Not a shove, a decision. He borrowed Derek's forward rush, turned it A. Quarter turn, stepped under, and stitched a thread of balance from Derek's heel to his hip to his shoulder. The black belt's body lifted. Not dramatic, not airborne, just enough to lose negotiation with gravity. James turned, guided, and placed him on the mat. Face up, air in, dignity intact. The room went silent. Even the rain on the roof seemed to wait. James stayed with him, one hand controlling the shoulder, the other hovering near the back of Derek's head like a seatbelt that never locked. He didn't pin. He safeguarded. Then, in a voice meant only for the man beneath him, but heard by everyone, he said clear as a bell, "I will not make you ashamed in front of your students." The lineage like a blessing. Something broke. Not bone, not pride. Something beneath both. Derek's breath hitched. His jaw worked. His eyes suddenly unarmored shone. James released the shoulder and helped him sit up, then kneel. He let go first. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the nurse began to clap. Not the sports clap of struck metal, but the soft, grateful clap people give at a wedding when the vows are right. The barista followed, then the delivery driver, then chairs up and down the wall. Even Mr. Lopez, who had been measuring liability with every step, put his hands together. Derek swallowed hard. He stood unsteady human and faced the room he'd tried to inherit by force. His voice cracked. He stopped, then started again. Smaller. I was wrong. He looked at James. About you. About teaching. About what this place is for. James shook his head once, not to deny the apology, but to keep it from turning into theater. Derek turned to his students, the ones who'd come with him like weather. "I taught you to chase dominance," he said. "He just taught me to chase responsibility if you'll have me." He looked back at James. "I'd like to learn from you from the beginning." A murmur rolled through the room. Surprise, then relief, then something like hope. James didn't make him beg. He placed a hand on Derek's shoulder, the same shoulder he'd redirected a minute ago, now steady as a dock post. Everyone is welcome when they're ready to listen. Sarah exhaled a tiny sound only Maya heard. She stepped forward, drawing the circle closed. "Then let's finish what we started. Partners switch. New drill verbal boundary plus exit. Words first, body second." People moved, laughing softly, lighter than they'd entered. The storm outside had thinned to a whisper. Maya approached her father, eyes bright. "You didn't flinch?" she said. "I didn't need to," he replied. She slid her hand into his for a second, squeezed, then let go to join a pair of newcomers by the chairs. Sarah walked to James. The room blurred to a warm hum, the shuffle of feet, the shift of weight, the sentences that keep people safe. She reached for his hand. Not secret, not loud, just there. He let his fingers lace with hers as anchor and answer. "You wrote the lesson," she said. "We wrote it," he corrected. She smiled. "Then let's keep teaching it." On the far wall, the sign-in board caught a wash of soft light. All are welcome. For once, it felt less like a slogan and more like a door no one would have to break to walk through. The sun dipped low behind the community center's wide glass windows, painting the floor with long amber shadows. The mats from the previous night's class were stacked neatly in the corner. But tonight wasn't about drills or demonstrations. Tonight was about closing a circle they had all opened together. Rows of folding chairs faced a modest stage set not for speeches but for music. A single spotlight glowed faintly overhead, and in its halo sat a cello on a wooden stand. The hum of quiet conversation filled the room. Neighbors, students, friends, and even strangers who'd heard about that night and wanted to be part of what followed. Sarah stood near the back, watching as Maya, her small frame determined and steady, walked up to the cello. James was beside her, not leading her, not pushing her, just there. He had always been just there. When Maya reached the instrument, she ran her fingertips along its polished curve, as if greeting an old friend. She adjusted the stool, settled in, and lifted the bow. Her eyes searched the crowd until they found her father. She didn't smile, not yet, but she gave a small nod that carried more weight than applause ever could. The first note of quiet storm bloomed into the air, warm and resonant. It was a melody that rose like a question and fell like an answer, looping gently like the ebb and flow of a tide that never wanted to leave. The room stilled. James's mind drifted not away, but deeper. The past weeks had been a storm. Derek's challenged the fracture in trust, the reconciliation, the lesson that had turned into something bigger than a class. Now, in this room, the storm had become music. Sarah slipped into the chair beside him. For a long while, they didn't speak. Then softly she said, "She's playing for you, you know." He glanced at her. "I think she's playing for us." Sarah's lips curved. "Maybe she's playing for everyone who needed to hear it." On the far side of the room, Derek stood near the door, not in the shadows, not hiding. His students were scattered among the crowd, watching Maya as if trying to memorize the way calm could sound. Derek caught James's gaze, and for the first time there was no challenge in it, only respect. The final notes of Quiet Storm floated down like the softest rain. The bow rested. Maya looked up, her eyes shimmering with the light she had poured into every note. The applause was instant and unrestrained, but James noticed she was watching him, waiting for his nod before she stood. He gave it slow and sure. When the room quieted, Sarah stepped onto the stage. "This program started as a class," she said, her voice carrying easily. "But classes end. Communities don't have to. Starting next month, we'll open these doors twice a week for free self-defense and confidence training. Anyone can join. No belts, no egos, just the rule. James taught us defense first. Respect always." The crowd murmured with approval. Someone in the back called out. "We'll be here," Sarah continued. "And once a month we'll end with music. Because sometimes the safest place in the world is in the sound of something beautiful." She turned to James. "Do you want to say something?" He shook his head. "I think she already said it." He nodded toward Maya, but the room wasn't done with him. The nurse from the first class stood. "You taught me I could walk home without holding my keys like a weapon," she said. "That's worth more than I can put into words." Others followed quick thanks, quiet stories of boundaries kept of fear, eased of a little more room to breathe. James listened, the weight of their words settling into him like a jacket he hadn't realized fit. When the last person spoke, Maya came to stand between him and Sarah. She took one of their hands in each of hers. Then, like a child presenting proof of something she had always believed, she lifted them until they met. James looked at Sarah, startled, but she didn't pull away. "She's been trying to do that for weeks," Maya said, grinning now. "Guess tonight was the night." Sarah laughed, a sound that broke something open in him. "Guess so." For a long moment, the three of them stood there, framed by the soft light of the cello stage, the hum of a community still applauding in quiet ways, handshakes, embraces, promises to return. Later, as they walked out into the cool night air, James glanced back through the glass doors. Inside, the cello still stood on its stand, catching the last glint of light before the room went dark. Sarah followed his gaze. "You think the storms are over?" He shook his head. "No, but we've got better ways to weather them now." Maya skipped ahead, her laughter cutting through the night like a bright ribbon. James watched her, then looked at Sarah. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not walking away when it got hard." She met his eyes. "I could say the same to you." They fell into step, the street lamps stretching their shadows side by side, and somewhere behind them, in the quiet of the empty hall, the last notes of Quiet Storm seemed to linger less like music now, more like a promise that strength would never be about breaking, but about holding, that safety would never be about walls, but about doors left open, and that sometimes the last lesson wasn't how to fight at all, but how to stay. And just like that, James, Sarah, and Maya stepped out into the night, carrying with them a lesson that wasn't just theirs, but ours too. Because sometimes the most powerful victories aren't the ones we win in the ring, but the ones we win in the heart. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what this story made you feel, or a moment in your life when you learned your last lesson. If this story touched you, inspired you, or simply warmed your heart, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next journey we take together. And if you know someone who needs this message, share it with them, because stories have a way of finding the people who need them most. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending this time with me. Until the next story, stay strong, stay kind, and keep believing in the quiet power of love and respect.